Hello and welcome to Yachting Yarns. In this episode, I speak with Rod West. Now, Rod had an unusual introduction to yachting. He didn't start till a little bit older than most people, but he has embraced life on the seas, and in particular, he has a passion for yacht racing. I started by asking him how long he had been playing around in boats.
I've been running around in boats, and I really got straight into yacht racing, and I've been doing that since 1982. Quite a long time. Surprisingly, I got into it while I was in the army. Yeah, I did 35 years in the Australian Army. Proud of that fact. Yeah, people say, "Well, why didn't you join the Navy?"
Yes.
Sailing is my sport and passion, and the Army was my profession, and I wouldn't want those two things reversed. So, yeah, I got into it 1982. Army used to have a program called Adventure Training, and there weren't any wars going on in that period. It was a nice, peaceful period, and the Army had this program called Adventure Training, and you could go off sailing, you could go off skiing, you could go off mountain climbing, you could do 100 other things, and I chose to go sailing, and been sailing ever since.
That must have been fantastic for all the Army guys.
Yeah, well, I think it was service wide, so it was Army, Navy, and Air Force. I think Army was probably the biggest proponent of it, but it was a very good program, and it's still active actually. But unfortunately, soldiers, sailors, and airmen these days don't have so much time to go and do it. But back in the early '80s, when there wasn't much going on, they had that program, and particularly for the officers, each year you had to do an annual assessment, and one of the boxes that had to be assessed was courage, and hard thing to assess courage if you're just hanging around the barracks. So Adventure Training was designed to do some assessment on this thing called courage. So it's kind of how it started.
So what sort of boats did you start off in?
Well, I missed all of the normal route into yacht racing, which is normally through dinghies and small boats, and I launched straight into a yacht called Anaconda 2, an 88-foot boat that was chartered by the Australian Defence Force, owned by a guy called Josko Grubik out of Adelaide. He built it, and when he built it, it was actually the largest fiberglass structure in the world. But he had trouble finding crews for it, and because you needed about 26 people to sail this thing. And then the Defence Force approached him to charter it to do the Whitbread around the world race, because the British forces had a team, Great Britain too, and they wanted to match it with the Brits. And so they put this charter in place with Anaconda. Long story short, while it was in the slipway, it actually fell over on Yoshko, cracked a hole, never made the Whitbread race. But it did make a thing called the Parmelia race, which was from South Africa to Perth, and the Army, Navy, and Air Force crewed the boat for that. And then they kept that charter going for another 7 years after, and did like sail training on Sydney Harbour. They did ocean racing, like Sydney Hobart yacht races, and a lot of other things around the coast. They had a full on program, and hundreds of defence men and women got a chance to cut their teeth on a very large racing yacht. So that's how I started.
You were kind of bit by that sailing bug early on.
Well, I just loved it. I played rugby for at least half of my life. It allowed me to as my rugby career was coming to a close, to take up another team sport. And ocean yacht racing is in my view the ultimate team sport. You need to work as a team. It goes on for a long time. You're in a completely foreign environment, and if the team doesn't all work together, everyone doesn't turn up for their watches, you don't do your job properly, you're probably going to break something or someone, or something's going to go horribly wrong. So that's what I love about long ocean racing. It's the journey with people that you trust, and so yeah, I've been pretty much doing it ever since. I bought my first boat. I got sick of sailing on other people's boats, so I bought my first boat in 1990, and I've been skippering my own boats ever since.
The whole culture of working in the army, that whole culture, it kind
Yeah.
of transposes to yachting, where everyone's got a job to do, everyone does their job,
Mm.
and everything goes right then.
Yeah, look, it's even beyond that. So you've got to do your planning. You've got to train the team. You've got to get the logistics right. You've got to get the boat preparation right. You've got to psychologically prepare the crew, particularly for things like Hobart or other long distance racing. And you've got to have a strategy. So all of those things have a military context, I guess.
Some of the races you do have an element of danger in them.
Well, you try and minimise the danger, but it's absolutely present all the time you go out there. But again, one of the great things about it, if you've got the right team and you've got people that you trust and have confidence in, the whole yacht race becomes an exercise in problem solving. So you never really know what's around the corner. You might break a boom, you might lose someone overboard, you might blow out a sail, a spinnaker, for example, which we did in our last Hobart. And then you've got to do workarounds. You've got to find ways to get back racing, and so you're continually doing what I would call uh, planning and preparing for the next disaster.
The very first Sydney to Hobart yacht race, when was that? Because that's the one all Australia knows. We know about North Queensland, we know about all the others, but the Sydney to Hobart is the one that everybody knows about. It sets off on Boxing Day. We all watch the start out of Sydney Harbour. It's fabulous to watch everything at once, all the boats out there watching and all the sailboats and going through the heads. It's dramatic. What was the first one you did?
Well, the actual yacht race started just after World War II. And last year, the one we did was the 75th year of Sydney Hobart. I was lucky enough to do the 50th Sydney Hobart, which was, I think, if memory serves, 1994. And I hope so. So that was the 50th. I did the 75th, which was last year, and I'd like to do the 80th, which is in 2025. So I might call it quits at that. That'll be Hobart number 8 for me, and that's probably enough, I reckon. It's hard on the body, it's hard on the boat, and it's very hard on the budget. So you don't want to do too many, particularly if you're the guy paying the bill. If you're the yacht owner, you're financing this thing. It's an expensive undertaking. To do the race is only half the adventure, well, not even half the adventure. You race down to Hobart, you're there in a couple of days. And then you find the boat is in Constitution Dock in Hobart, and then you've got to get it home. And for us, getting it home means getting it all the way back to the Gold Coast. So, round trip, it's probably about 2,000 nautical miles. And all the gun crew get off in Hobart, of course. And so thanks very much, boss. That was great fun. We'll see you back on the Gold Coast, and then you and a few others get to cruise the boat home, which I don't mind either. That's another aspect of sailing that I really enjoy.
You just slowly make your way back. You don't try and get back quickly.
Well, we turn ourselves into fair weather sailors as we've already done the race and start coming home. So we take very good cognizant of the weather patterns, and we try and sail with prevailing breezes and not too much of it. And the beauty is, for something like a Hobart, and even when we do Hamilton Island Race Week, because you've got to get the boat to Hamilton Island. There are so many places you can call into along the coast of Tasmania, Victoria, New South Wales, and Queensland that bringing the boat back from Hobart, the only overnight sail you've got to do is really Bass Strait because you don't really have a choice. But everywhere else, you can sail overnight. If you want to make up a bit of time and you've got good weather, yeah, keep going. But otherwise, there's so many places to call into. So generally, when we cross Bass Strait, we normally call into Flinders Island, which is a beautiful place to stop. Lady Barron is the little village that's there, and people look after you there, and there's a port there and a wharf and a pub. That's about a third of the way across Bass Strait. We then sail the last 2/3 and generally turn up in Eden. And the people of Eden are fantastic, looking after boats coming back from Hobart. They invite you up to the club for showers and a meal, and they look after you. And then really from Eden, you do just day sailing pretty much all the way home.
All those little places you stop in, it must be exciting for them to have one of the big race boats pull in. That you must get a good warm reception.
Look, you do, and it always creates a bit of interest and a bit of buzz. We go ashore. We normally go ashore in our team shirts, and people want to know. They want to know about the boat. They want to know about the race. They want to know about you, and because it's also holiday season, so there's normally lots of people around. Sometimes we just call in and anchor in a river mouth somewhere, or in a small bay, Jarvis Bay, for example. But other times, you call in places like Ulladulla or Bateman's Bay. You go to the marina there, and that always creates a bit of a buzz. There's always a few yachts calling in there on the way home.
So your boat's a bit different. You have a few of life's little modern luxuries in there that mean others might not necessarily have fridges and microwaves and beds. What those boats, when they're doing the big races and they don't have any of that fit, where do people sleep? Where do they eat? How do they live on board?
Well, I've done that thing as well, and that's pretty austere living. So on the true race boats, there's not many creature comforts. So you sleep in what is called pipe berths. So they're just berths that are literally a pipe with a like a canvas sewn into the middle, a bit like a hammock.
Oh, wow.
And you hot bunk it, so that's not your bunk. It's, you're in a watch system, and so one watch goes off, one watch comes back down, and they hop back into the bunk, and that's how you sleep. But when I say that's how you sleep, you're at the call of the watch captain on deck. So habitually, you just get your head down, about to fall asleep, and then someone yells out, "All hands on deck!" So you go, "Oh no!" So get yourself back in your wet weather gear and your safety gear, and then back up onto the boat, and you might be there for half an hour, and then you get relieved, so you go back down and try and get some sleep. So it's pretty full on non-stop stuff, and that I think is part of the enjoyment and part of the challenge. Food wise, on some of those boats, it's either sandwiches or dehydrated food, like you would get from a Paddy Pallin adventure store.
So you're living like astronauts.
Living like astronauts, yeah. And weight is an issue. So you're restricted on how much clothing you can take. Some skippers go a bit overboard and make you chop your toothbrush in half, get rid of the end piece. You don't really need that. Yeah. No, serious, absolutely.
Does that go to save an ounce?
If you're an ounce by 20 people on board the boat, it can make a difference, that and all the other things. So one can of deodorant for the boat, for example. And
what?
Yeah. But on our boat, every boat's a compromise. So those racing boats are a compromise on creature comforts. And so when they're doing deliveries or redelivering, it's not a whole lot of fun. But our boat is a good compromise between cruiser and racer. So we do have creature comforts. We do have fridges, freezers, microwaves, proper beds, nice dining table downstairs. It's very dry. Yet it still gets along pretty well for what it is. So I've done the other thing, but at my age, I prefer a few more creature comforts. Thank you.
Well, you were saying before, every now and then someone goes overboard. You're moving along pretty fast when you're doing those races. That is quite a hoik you're doing. If someone falls overboard, it must take you a while to get back to them, and then you lose all that time in the race.
That's losing time in the race is the least of your problems. If you lose someone overboard, that is a serious emergency. And I've lost, in my years of sailing, I've lost 3 people overboard over time. And none of them in really bad conditions, and one of them was in completely calm conditions.
Wow!
Just lost their footing and weren't looking after themselves. We always say one hand for the boat, one hand for you. The crew has an obligation to stay on board the boat.
Aren't they tethered on? Aren't they strapped on? Sometimes.
You are tethered, but you're tethered to a line. It's not going to stop you going overboard. It's just going to make you hang off the back of the boat. If a lot of people, if you're going on a long ocean race, will always wear their life jacket on deck, but not everyone harnesses on. And the guy that we lost just off the Gold Coast here, it was a calm day. Didn't have a life jacket on, didn't have anything on. Just lost his footing, fell over, went underneath the lifelines. We had a spinnaker up at the time, and so we're moving away from that person. That person, you just see their head. So you're moving away from that head in the water at about 8 knots, and it doesn't take long to lose sight of that person, even in very, very calm water. We have, and most boats have, a bunch of procedures that you have. The word goes out, man overboard. Bit sexist, I know, but man overboard shorter than saying woman overboard, I guess. And then whoever's on the helm physically touches someone and says, you are the watcher. If you're the watcher, you don't get involved in anything else. You just walk around the deck with an outstretched hand at that head in the water. That's the fastest way to get back to someone in the water. Yeah. At the same time, push the man overboard button on the GPS plotter, and then you get things sorted out. Normally, there's various things you can do, but I like just to have a consistent course. When we're sorted out, turn back 180 degrees, back along that reciprocal course, and hopefully being guided back to the person in the water. For the long distance races, everyone's got a personal locator beacon. So when they're in the water, that sends a signal to Sea Safety Centre in Canberra. And then most people also have a man overboard device. So that's a separate device, but that comes up on the boat's GPS plotter. And so you can use that to get back to the person in the water, particularly at night time. When we lost the guy just off Southport, we'd just gone around a mark of the course, and the spinnaker went up. And then I heard this shout, I'm helming, I heard this shout, man overboard. I said, which boat? They said, ours. I went, what?
Well, some of the yachties I've spoken to have got mesh. They've got the railing, they've actually got mesh all around. So if they slide in a storm, they don't go under, they actually go into the mesh.
We have mesh up by the bow.
Yeah.
And that does two things. The most dangerous positions on the boat are up at what we call adventure land, that's the pointy end of the boat, the bow. So the four-deckies, as we call them, they're a very different breed of human beings, people that want to be up on the bow and bouncing around and getting very wet. So we have netting up there, but we don't have netting anywhere else because you use the crew weight to sit out and flatten the boat.
Yes.
So what's referred to as rail meat, you have people sitting on the side of the boat, their legs over the boat, so you've got to get under the lifelines, and so you can't really have netting there.
I haven't heard that expression.
Rail meat.
Rail meat. That's a good expression. So you only do races in Australia. Have you done any big races overseas? Have you gone beyond our shores?
I've gone beyond our shores, but not serious yacht racing. I was in the United States for a while and did some sailing out of Miami, but it was mainly very, very close to shore stuff on someone else's boat. But I have cruised, sailed in Croatia, in Hawaii, in the United States, in the Med, and in New Zealand, but not so much racing. We hope next year, if they run the race, that we'll do the Sydney to Noumea race, which has been on my bucket list for 20 years. I have done the Sydney to Lord Howe Island race, which they used to run every second year, but COVID has killed that. They haven't resurrected it. So I've got a few others on the bucket list.
Yeah, what are they?
Well, there's a few very good regattas over in the Caribbean, which I would like to do.
So what's your current boat?
So our boat is called Esprit, E-S-P-R-I-T, which it's got a bit of military context, esprit de corps, and there's also a bit of spirit involved. So that's the name of the boat, but the type of boat is called a Vauquerez, which Vauquerez with a W, W-A-U-Q-U-I-E-Z. It's been brought into the Beneteau family but the Beneteaus have made the wise decision to keep the pedigree of the Vauqueray alive, and that pedigree means that it's old school boat building. So the boats are made by the same team of 12 people in Lille in France, and they literally build the boat from the keel up. Same group of people. In fact, they've all signed a plaque that's on my companionway steps. With the Vauqueray, they try and keep that old school boat building going. There's not that many in the world. I think there's only 4 in Australia, and so the boat we have, the Centurion 45S, I think there's only 40 in the world, 4 in Australia, and I own one of them.
Do you know the other 3?
There's one in. I know one other. I think the others are in other places like Melbourne and I think Perth. But there's one in RQ in Manly in Brisbane.
Where did you find it?
We found it in Sydney, and it was in the period just leading up into COVID. There weren't that many boats for sale at the time. I didn't think I could afford it, to be honest. But the owner was from New Zealand, and he was stuck in New Zealand, so he was kind of keen to sell, and that suited me. So it's only had one other owner, and literally he's the guy that ordered the boat and made decisions about the scheme down below and the colours of the cushions and all of that sort of stuff. So we've been very fortunate to be able to buy this boat with only one previous owner.
Does he come over and visit his boat?
No, he hasn't come back to Australia. He's still in New Zealand. So we talk to him, though. I keep asking him questions every now and then.
So he keeps in contact.
Yeah, he keeps in contact.
For the young people coming up, how is it different for young people doing it now than it was for you, say, 30 years ago?
Look, I think there's many more opportunities for getting into sailing and into yacht racing as well. So there are so many yacht clubs around these days that run kids sailing, and it's very cheap. So my own yacht club is Southport Yacht Club. They have a very, very good program for young sailors to take them from no knowledge right through to crewing big keel boats like us. And there's a much more formal and structured process than when I started sailing. So really, when I started sailing, you didn't need any qualifications. You could just buy a boat, take it out, and off you went. But now you need qualifications. You need people to train you. You need people to sign off on your skill sets in a logbook, and I think that's a very, very good thing. So I think in summary, there's more opportunities these days. A lot of encouragement to get people out there sailing, and it's a great sport, a really good sport for young boys and girls to get out there and sail. They get so much self-confidence. They've got to rig their boats. They've got to work with their crew. They've got to come back and de-rig and tell tall tales to their mates about how they went on the race course and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I think there's a lot more opportunities.
Is there a yachting brotherhood?
Yeah, absolutely, there is. Yeah, and you see that in 100 different ways. So you see that you do a hard race and a long race like Sydney Hobart, where everyone's a competitor, and you see the boats as they start on Sydney Harbour, and there's no quarter given. Boats run into each other, and there's yelling and screaming and swearing, and you race competitively all the way to Hobart, and then you get to Hobart, and you go to have what they call the quiet little drink, and then everyone just comes together, and everyone wants to interact with each other, and how did you go? How was your trip? What did you learn? What did you break? There's a real camaraderie there, and from all walks of life, which I think is fantastic too. So you've got from millionaires to kids, people without a whole lot of money, but they're crewmen on someone else's boat. It's a great level, and no one cares.
That's fantastic. I know that with the yachties who travel around the world, there's a willingness to help each other and to come together, because you do this for me and I'll do this for you. And
Yeah, you see that too. If you break something, someone will come along and someone will have the skills to be able to fix it. And that includes the little boats, the little kids. There's always someone there. They break a boom. Someone knows how to fix a boom. They'll hook in and help repair it. And then the next day they're fierce competitors back on the race course again. So it is good like that. And you see the crews and the boats bouncing from Sydney Hobarts to, we run Sail Paradise here on the Gold Coast, a regatta, big regatta, and then you might do a race to Keppel Islands, and then on to Hamilton Island, and then maybe Magnetic Island after that. So you see the same boats, not always the same crew. Sometimes the crews rotate, but you keep seeing the same people, the same faces. Oh yeah, well, we missed you last year, but we're going to beat you this year, and it's just a whole lot of interaction and fun.
I'm going to ask you, you both get a bit battered, you said, in the races. What sort of damage can they get just from going from Sydney to Hobart?
Well, I always say that owning a racing yacht is a really good way to redistribute your wealth. You're always breaking stuff and you're always buying stuff. But for something like a Hobart, I mean, anything can happen. You can sink the boat. You think about the bad Hobart.
That one.
20 boats that didn't make shore, and a lot of people got seriously injured or died. Extreme conditions. That was really an absolutely extreme set of circumstances. But even on the last Hobart, there was a boat lost its keel, boat lost its rudder. There's a couple of things that are really vulnerable on a boat. So you have a mast, and then you have a boom, and then the mainsail sits off that mast and boom. But where that boom hits where that boom is connected to the mast is really vulnerable. And if you do some sort of wild jibe, which means that the boom's going from one side of the boat to the other side of the boat in like a nanosecond, potentially you can break that gooseneck off and you're out of the race. And that happens quite regularly. You can blow your sails.
Yeah.
So we blew 2 sails on the way to Hobart, but we're at the lower end of the scale. There were boats there that blew like 8 or 10 sails.
When you're doing it at night, is it more scary doing the Sydney to Hobart, doing that sort of speed in the dark? Is that more scary?
Yes, absolutely. Very, very scary. I'm not sure scary is the right word, but you're certainly far more aware, and you're certainly paying much more attention. You've got far less frame of reference for the boat. You probably can't see the horizon. You can't see the waves that are coming at you. You can just
see the other boats?
At night time, you can see the lights of the other boats. So they're masthead light and port and starboard light.
Oh, okay.
If you've got like a full moon, you might be able to see some of the boats that are very close to you. But it's funny, like if Sydney Hobart, you might have 120, 150 yachts in the fleet.
Yeah.
A day out of Sydney Harbour, you're flat out seeing another boat. Everyone goes their different ways. Everyone has different strategies. So, and you might not see another boat until you get into Hobart. It's quite funny like that, but yeah, you've got to train yourself to sail at night time. It is much more scary, particularly for crews maybe doing their first ocean passage, first ocean race, something like a Sydney Hobart. That's when people get seasick. They get reluctant to come up on deck, so fear can take hold of some crews if they're not properly prepared and trained.
Well, you sound like you absolutely love your racing. You're not going to give it up anytime soon.
No, not even with a new knee. I hope to be racing tomorrow night. So, well, Thursday night is our twilight racing night at South Yacht Club, and it's a bit more social. It's not quite so full on. I've sailed all up and down the east coast of Australia, sometimes just with my wife and family, and I think. Sailing is one of those few sports that a whole family can do together.
Yeah.
I guess I could be playing golf, and if you're playing golf, you disappear for pretty much all of the Saturday. Yeah. But with sailing, and fortunately, all my family loves sailing, and so you get out there and you're all together and you have a good time and come back and around the kitchen table and debrief yourselves on the things you did well and they certainly let me know the things I did not so well as skipper.
Well, I really, really loved talking to you. I can see you love your racing, and hopefully we'll encourage some more people to get involved and get down to their local yacht club and give it a go.
Highly recommend it. Yeah, they shouldn't be reticent about that. It's, in the old days, you really need to know, you had to know someone that had a boat really to break into it. But now it's very encouraging. Every yacht club, you just got to go and knock on their door, see them at their reception, say, look, I'm interested in going sailing, and someone will take care of them.
Well, thank you so very much for your time. I've really enjoyed hearing all your stories, and good luck with all your racing.
Thank you so much, and really enjoyed the conversation.